Welcome to Making Beans, the podcast where we stir up raw and uncensored conversations about cooking, food journeys, and the vibrant experiences of working in the hospitality industry. I'm your host, Chef John Wayne. Let's get cooking. Episode 4, Old School with Meridith Moore. She's a Santa Barbara local and a great industry friend. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. I want to talk about old school Santa Barbara, 60s, 70s. You had a catering business, correct?
Yes.
Did you have a restaurant as well?
Yes.
So I would just want to learn about that era. Let's talk about, take us back to those times of food and wine, which obviously for the area is a heyday, and especially wine development. And then I'm sure all the food that came. Who were the notable chefs, winemakers? What were your experiences?
Well, I want to start with 1965, and I got my driver's license. I lived in Los Angeles. My mom didn't drive. My dad was in the Navy and gone a lot, so she wanted to come to Santa Barbara. So my best friend Pep and I would put our surfboards on my Volkswagen Bug, get my mom in there and drive up and go to Arnaldi's. So this is 1965, 66. My mom was Italian, and at Arnaldi's Italian restaurant, there's bocce ball courts. And it was the original owners, and we'd drop her off and we'd go surf at Henry's. Then we'd come back, eat, and go stay at the Biltmore, which a cottage then was under $100 a night. So that was my first Santa Barbara experience. And then I lived in the Russian River from 67 to 69 and then moved to Santa Barbara. And I've been here ever since in the food world. So I've owned delis, smoothie bars, restaurants. My major success was catering. So the reason I agreed to do this podcast is one of our wonderful food writers. We have two I admire, George Jacobson and Matt Ketman. One of them did an article in the Independent about what's going on in the food scene in Santa Barbara right now, which is awesome. And the 3 different groups that are bringing in great restaurants. But one of the owners of those groups or higher up guy said, Santa Barbara didn't used to have anything that I wanted. I would just drive by. And I went, isn't that interesting? We kind of wanted you to just drive by. So in moving here in 1969, besides Arnaldi's, there was also Mom's Italian Village across the street. And they, as typical with Italians, they didn't get along. And people either loved Mom's or they loved Arnaldi's. I was an Arnaldi's girl because they made real pesto. But Mom's had aglio e olio, my favorite pasta.
One of my favorites as well. Yeah.
And once at Mom's, I learned the trick of soaking a little chili flakes in vinegar to add to the garlic when you sauteed it, which I've always appreciated. So that's how it all started. There were so many wonderful restaurants, and I worked in the business from funky little dives like Frank's Rice Bowl. And you'd go in and you'd order something and Frank would say, no, you eat what I want you to eat. And there was also the other extreme, which was Olive Mill Bistro, Paul Commons restaurant across the street, Somerset. This is in Montecito, where I first enjoyed fine dining on the level that they did do it. There were also bakeries like Vior's where you could, with my delis, I'd order my sub rolls perfectly baked every morning. There were butcher shops. There was Quality Market, which had huge wheels of cheese, and they were American cheese, but wonderful Wisconsin cheddar. And you go in and they'd cut off pieces for you, and they had the meat department. All of that's, you don't see that anymore.
Yeah, you don't see that anymore for sure.
And then one day, all of these wonderful places, little diners here and there, the list goes on and on. One day, O'Deal opened up Moose O'Deal. What a wonderful woman. And there was Josie's Four Winds and El Cielito and Casa de Seville and Talk of the Town, which I went to in the mid 60s with a bunch of divers that worked for the oil companies. And one of them ordered, bring me your best bottle of wine. And the food was so good. And later on, he told me if we got his credit card, it was a $700 bottle of wine, which we thought was unbelievably expensive in those days. There was the Reindeer Room on Santa Claus Lane with one of the best raw bars I've ever eaten at in the United States.
Was uni big back then?
I did not learn about uni until, and this leads to something that I know you wanted to talk about. I was lucky enough to know Julia Child, and Dario invited us to Dario, where I took her, she needed a ride. I took her there, and he did 20 tastes, and her job was to say what was the ingredients, and the only one that stumped her was uni.
Really? Yeah. Well, I mean, I would assume it would not be as big as it is now. Now it's considered very invasive in the area, and a lot of chefs are using it everywhere. And but maybe back then it wasn't so much. What were like the seafoods that were coming out of the ocean at the time? Did you have the spot prawns and the lobsters?
Yes, and I was lucky enough in the 60s to go out with abalone divers to the islands, and they went down and brought up the abalone, and we pounded it and dipped it in Dixie fry and cooked it over wood burning stove on land.
Yeah, that's really nice. Who were like back then? Who were the big winemakers? For me, think of Clendenin, obviously.
So, at the beginning, Pierre Lafond had Santa Barbara Winery. Inglenook was big down here, which really was a fairly decent wine. In fact, it's getting more recognition. But one day, so this had to be around 77, a very good friend of mine and her boyfriend and I went to see Star Wars at the matinee, and
like the original showing.
The original showing at the Arlington, and the gentleman's name was Steve Slaney, and he was an artist who ran the art museum at UCSB. And we walked out, and we were just stunned. We were blown completely away. We got in his Cadillac convertible and drove up to San Ynez and went up to Zaca Mesa. I've never been, and they were closing. And the man closing it, and Slaney reached in his pocket and pulled out a joint, and he opened it back up. And that was Jim Clendenin, and that's how I met him.
Okay.
And God bless him for always being kind to me.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so Zaca Mesa was an early player, but there were a few around. But,
Lane?
Well, Lane's my hero.
Or was she a little bit later?
She was around then, but where she became of note was she stood up. This is uncensored. So some of those guys in the food and wine were motherfuckers and not very nice.
Yeah.
And she took them on.
That's good. I mean, that's great.
Yeah, and I just worshipped her.
Did she train under anyone, or she was just self-taught?
I don't know all of that.
Don't know all the facts.
But I do know that she worked with the ones I considered the pioneers and the greats.
Right.
Okay. And, a lot was going on in those days. A lot of stuff.
A lot of evolution, right?
Well, no, behavior. And fortunately, I didn't get into Coke, but not that, I don't know if she did or not, but there's a lot of Coke going on with those guys and other things.
There's a lot of partying during that time, yeah.
Pretty crazy stuff go on. So I didn't really fit in there. I was a young mother. I didn't fit into it, but I saw it. But Lane stood up to them, and she was as good as it gets.
That's awesome. I mean, definitely a great inspiration, I'm sure, for a lot of the female winemakers. There's a lot of them now.
Well, she's greatly respected. I say it's because of her. We have Pinot Noir in the valley.
Yeah, Pinot's great.
But yes, now the women winemakers now, I'm so happy. And I went to hear a talk by Jessica Gasca, who's the only Latina winemaker in Santa Barbara County, and she owns Story of Soil. Mm-hmm. And she spoke, and I went, oh my goodness, she has the history. She knew about Lane and what she did, and it makes me so happy the history won't go away.
That's good. I mean, it's great to pay homage to the roots.
And I was in there. I mean, when I say I didn't party down with those guys, I was in there and saw what was going on with Richard Sanford and Benedict and just Whitcraft.
Yeah.
The names are all,
I mean, there's a lot of names, a lot of definite names. Now, with you in this and getting into, say, your like catering, that was like your big business, you said. So, like, who are like notable people maybe you served at the time?
Well, one thing is I didn't care. I wasn't starstruck. The only one that ever I had trouble with was Jeff Bridges, because I love Starman, the movie, and I acted normal. I catered their 20th anniversary. I acted normal, but I had to go to the chiropractor the next day because I was so frozen with it's
It's him, yeah.
But you name them, we saw them. But my forte, well, I also had a wholesale burrito business to UCSB,
Okay.
which brought in a net of 30,000 a month. I'm sorry, a gross, and that would get us through the slow times.
It's a good little business, yeah.
And
for sure.
I also like doing weddings, which a lot of caterers don't, and so I got the wedding business. And
you get the bridezillas, that's why.
I never had a bridezilla.
No,
I had neediness, but not really. But then I was also lucky enough to work for some very wealthy clients who had beautiful homes. And so let's segue into how I got to meet Julia. So I had a catering kitchen, which I shared with a pastry chef, Christine Dahl, who was phenomenal. And she rented from me. And she did all their wedding cakes, like Charles Schultz's daughter, Billy Crystal's daughter. And sometimes the client would come in to be interviewed in our kitchen, and the person bringing them, the coordinator, wouldn't let me be there, which I thought was pretty funny because it was my kitchen. But there was a group called the Women's Culinary Alliance that Christine and other women chefs started with Julia Child. And I'm not a joiner and wasn't in it, but Christine worked so hard to make that a success that I joined to help her. And every year at Christmas, they had a big Christmas party for all the women in the organization. And so the first year I helped her, everybody got a swag basket, and I took over that. And it was at the Music Academy. And so everybody got a basket with, I worked really hard to get great donations. So at the event, Christine Dahl came up to me and said, "We're seating you next to Julia Child as a thank you." And I absolutely did not want to. I said, no, no, no. And Beth, who owned Kaleidoscope Flowers, and Lisa, who was not only a firefighter, but made a vinaigrette, said, "We'll sit with you." So I sat next to Julia and was introduced. And she said, "I had the worst lunch today at the Bacara." And I go, "Oh, that's too bad." And said, "Where did you have lunch?" I said, "I'm not telling you." And she said, "Oh, tell me." And I said, "I had a hot dog at Costco." And she said, "I love their hot dogs." And I loved her from that moment on. So through that, she said that one of the things that she needed when her assistant wasn't here was a ride sometime. Julia had this idea to raise money for scholarships for students for the city colleges, Santa Barbara City College's culinary program, which was Conversations with Julia. And what she did is she needed estate type kitchens that could hold 45 to 50 people seated to watch a chef work at the kitchen island, while she sat in a director's chair and talked with them. And she asked me to help her with that. So what I could do that because I had several clients with kitchens definitely large enough for that. And so the different chefs at the time that came in was the chef from the El Encanto, the chef from Citronelle, the chef from Sage and Onion, and there were several chefs, and I would hook them up with winemakers. And my favorite one was at a home way up in the hills, phenomenal estate. And Jim Clinton and Bob Unclemat was the winemaker, and I believe the chef was the chef from Citronelle. But just to be there with Julia and Jim, who she adored, and the chef and the people at the time, this was in the 90s, paid $500 a person. And then one of my jobs was to have her books set up so afterwards people would buy her books and she'd sign them and I'd open it to the right page.
Oh, nice.
So that's my Julia connection. And then I was done with the catering and done with the restaurant work, and I got a job as the event manager at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History in 2003, where I worked for 18 years running their events. And I told her this amusing story. The first Friday, I started on a Tuesday. they had put together the natural history of chocolate,
Mm.
and it was hysterical. There were so many funny things. One being that the chocolate fountain was set up by the creek, so the wind blew it, so chocolate was flying all over everybody.
Oh,
They didn't care. They were licking it off.
yeah, I'm sure nobody would care.
So I was telling Julia, and she said, this sounds like something that would be a good thing there. So because of her influence, we did the natural history of olive oil, which is pertinent to Santa Barbara because of the Franciscan fathers brought it here.
Right.
And then she would connect me with people like Daryl Conti, who's a major importer, and then local olive oil companies for a panel. And there was tastings, and then there were booths set up with different restaurants and winemakers doing food with olive oil, including Chef Michael Hutchins, who did olive oil ice cream.
Stuff.
And we did the natural history of tequila, shellfish, and that then Dr. Carl Hutter, who was executive director, told me that the wine festival that had started in '83 at the museum and then left and went to the Music Academy, we could bring it back because the Music Academy was getting rid of it so they could have qualified for a building permit. And he asked if I could do it. And I said, sure. And he told me that he was at a dinner and with Mr. Miller, who owns Viennacito Vineyards, and Mr. Miller said, it won't work. And I just need to hear that. And I go, oh, yeah. And so I brought it back, and it turned into a very good wine festival. Who doesn't want to go by Mission Creek and taste wine?
Right.
And then I went to work getting vendors to do food. So now it's a food and wine festival. It's a major fundraiser.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, I got to know a lot more of the winemakers, and just I'm in awe of the pioneers. And like I said, also the new up and coming people that are keeping it alive and doing such amazing things.
No, that's awesome. Awesome. Great story. Which, your winemaker dinners is kind of how we met, being connected when I was at Pico out there, and I was introduced to you to do some of our winemaker dinners.
So what happened was, when I decided to retire, I sent an email to all the participants in the festival and thanked them for what they did and asked that they would still keep participating. And the owners of Pico, who were major supporters of the festival and the museum, asked me to come and do some wine dinners. And so I did, and got to meet the chef and see his work. And then they opened up the Lumen Wine Bar, and I would work on Sundays, and I would just love to peek into the kitchen and watch, because it had been years since I'd been around someone that knew their stuff and watched chef work. I was just so in awe of him. And his wife was the GM of the restaurant, and her systems and everything, just so impressed, and with their patience and kindness, and what a good job they did.
No, that's awesome.
And there's more than just that. There's a spirit in Los Alamos, which spreads to all the restaurants, which is part of, the good old days when there was nothing there except for a comfort food place. And as it grew, and now it's a food mecca.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, the area has been growing, like Los Olivos as well, and a lot of opportunity out there.
Rapidly changed from when Los Olivos was chintz fabric and dusty silk flowers and really bad quality food to what it is now.
Oh yeah, now Michelin stars and are out there. So yeah, come a long way. That's awesome. So what, during your catering businesses, what might have been some early challenges for you? Staff.
That's all.
It's still true today.
The only reason I quit was employees. And things like, I tried everything. I'd buy Ralph Lauren white shirts, and I'd have them dry cleaned and have them for them, and they'd show up with yellow stains,
wrinkled or stained.
And I'd go, well, that's unacceptable. And they'd say, well, when I worked at the Sam Parker Golf Course, they didn't mind.
You can't trust the staff. There's a lot of places that there's two sides of the story. Some people like to launder in house, and they issue the uniforms, and some just issue the uniforms to them, and they make them take care of it. And it's another level of nanny babysitting that you have to do if you give it to them and let them handle it. I'm of the one, I really like to just have a professional service do it for the staff, and it's issued to the staff, and it's less of a headache.
And that's minor. I mean, we'd be putting on an event and one of the bartenders would disappear, and I go, where did he go? And he had gone behind the building, sad because the song that the DJ was playing made him think of the girl that broke his heart. And we couldn't find him for 20 minutes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Or sending one of the staff to run an errand and he didn't come back forever. And I said, what happened? And someone had hit a possum and he got out of the car to take care of it and take it to the hospital. Meanwhile, it's the most important day of these people's lives. Or being way out in the country, in the foothills, and opening up the ice chest and they forgot the salmon. And having to drive to Montecito to buy it,
go get it,
a fishmonger for more money than we profited.
Of course, but you gotta make it happen, and the client has no idea. Hopefully,
no idea. But those are the negatives. It was a wonderful time, and I still run into people that go, Meredith, you catered our wedding. This is our granddaughter, or this is our daughter. She just started college. And one time I was walking and this young man came out of a store and he said, Meredith, do you remember me? And I said, I don't. He was one of my employees and he owns an office supply store now. And he just said, you were the best person to work with. It was just amazing. And those are reassuring because
I love that. Yeah.
Sometimes I lay in bed and go, I cannot believe I had the nerve to do that. And right. Christine Dahl, the pastry chef, will laugh about weekend where she did 8 wedding cakes and I did 3 weddings. And what were we thinking?
Right. I definitely, those connections are amazing. And I was just in Los Olivos yesterday at Patty's Tavern in Bomaro. You remember Bomaro at Pico? He's working there now. And he saw me at the bar. He's like, oh, chef, we miss you. And, all those things. And it's great, those people connections that you develop with your staff. But it's also, I still am connected to some people who have been fans, coming in the restaurant, or maybe I did their wedding as well. I still have great connections with those people if I see them. And it's definitely, it brings that, that satisfaction and that self-worth, which made it all worthwhile. So
speaking of Bomaro, I have friends I've made since those days that are my age, and I'm 75 and older, and we'll be at a restaurant and the busboy will run up and give me a big, huge hug and kiss. And I get kidded and I'm like, what are you laughing at? He goes, well, how did you know him? Blessing of my life, the salt of the earth, those people.
Oh yeah.
Salt of the earth.
There's so many of them. So still talking about your catering business, what was like the dish you were known for or you love to cook the most?
Italian cuisine and Mexican cuisine. And near the end, I got really into seafood because I am not a chef. I'm a purveyor of fine foods, or was, but I can cook. But I had the chef, Sinan Aparicio, who was just phenomenal. And we started going away from meat and more towards fish because it was becoming more popular.
Right.
And I also got quite a reputation for displays. I liked doing plated dinners because we could control them better. But I have an album of photos of my buffets and I really got into it. And that would be everything from making 2 feet tall cheese sticks to baked bries and baked savory cheesecakes.
Well, you got to show me that one day.
Whole poached salmon with, the whole.
Right, the whole display.
Make it look like it was swimming.
Oh, it's nice.
I also only wanted to ever have a successful deli. And what I did have a deli downtown for a while, and it was across the street from a fire department. And so I got to know the firefighters. And so one day I was working at the museum, and one of my jobs was to rent out the auditorium. I'd get a call, and caller ID shows fire department, and it's the captain. I don't know if you remember me, but I used to be at Station 2 and used to sandwiches. And I go, yeah, what's going on? And he said, well, we are a city fire department, but the city wants us to pay $1,000 to use the rec center for our graduation. And I wondered how much you would charge for the auditorium. And I said, just come on down, because those firefighters saved the museum twice by then and then once more. So it became the place where the fire department had their graduations and their events. And then the county started doing it. Then the police started doing it. And the neighbors one night called the police on the event, and they were all at the party.
They're all at the party. Oh, that's funny.
So those ties are those are priceless.
Well, community ties like that,
Yes.
yeah, are definitely priceless, and taking care of the first responders for sure.
Yes.
For sure. So I remember when we had a Zoom when we first met, and we were scheduling the winemaker dinners, and I remember you said you were afraid of me.
I was so scared of you. You're so stern. I fell in love with Liz immediately, like clicked. But I thought, you know, I was never a mucky muck. In fact, when I didn't want to be the best. I wanted to be right in the middle, because what goes up comes down, and
Right.
there was always that. Oh, they are the very best. But I aspired to do my best, and there was a time where I had a chance to get in to LA, and I did a big event on Rodeo Drive. You can keep that world. Life's too short.
Mm.
But yes, I was in awe of you, and you were so kind, but so good at what you do, and I'm so blessed that I got to know you and consider you a dear friend. Plus, one of the questions I ask people is Italy or France, and you said Italy, and
Yep.
I said, yes,
Italy all the way.
and it's like Napa or Sonoma. It's Sonoma, although nothing wrong with Napa.
Yes, Sonoma for sure.
So I had a little restaurant for a short time, an Italian restaurant, and we made all our pasta from scratch.
Nice.
And every day I would prep everything, get it ready for Shen and the chef. He'd come in and we'd sit down and we'd write the menu by hand and do a different menu every night. And across the street was a printing press. This was before computers. And I would run over the handwritten menu with a coffee mug with wine in it for the owner's wife, and she'd drink her wine out of the cup, and we would Xerox off the menus. So that's how
This is Xerox.
That was the job. That was what my little restaurant was like. And that fire chief, that's how he really remembered me, was he was a regular there.
Oh, nice. Nice. Good times. What's like another good memory that you have from back then?
Going into restaurants where the bartender just pushed the margarita across the bar to me. That was the paradise, which was where I probably hung out the most in my whole
paradise
life. So we'd finish the event, which would end at 10. By 11, I'd walk into the paradise and Bruce would just push the margarita over. Or one of my favorite restaurants was short-lived, but it was called Meridith. And I'd walk in and the bartender would push the champagne over to me, and just, they knew what you liked and they knew you and your favorite table. And that does still go on.
Right. So flash forward to now. What are your favorite restaurants right at this moment?
That's a tough one because I don't go out that much anymore. However, even though I was critical about the gentleman that said that he didn't come to Santa Barbara because there didn't used to be good things, with the Acme hospitality has brought into town, I'm so impressed by. Probably
great group.
Lokita.
Yeah, Lokita.
Lokita is just amazing.
So they had a star at one point, I believe.
Oh, they did.
Yeah,
they deserve it.
Yeah.
And Helena Bakery.
Yeah, Helena's great.
Yes, and you know, I'm a hamburger junkie, and one of the things Julia did, we looked for the best hamburger, and for a long time it was the Paradise Burger. And I would go with, like, I went with her once to the ranch, and the chef made a Wagyu beef hamburger with Flexigold and foie gras. The one at the Paradise was better, but the best smash burger is the Third Window. And
Third Window, yeah,
Third Window is the place to go for that. And then Lurdy, Tyler Wines, opened up a tasting room next to the Libero, and on Thursdays after 4, you can get a hamburger, not a smash burger, that would be the winner of the best burger I've had.
Okay.
Then you know, there's Ramon Velasquez, who opened up Corazon Cucina in the public market, and then now has quite a few restaurants. I'm really impressed by what he does.
I think Corazon just got either a plate or a bib.
Oh, good.
I think.
I don't know how he does it. I mean, he's got the one in Montecito, one in Ventura. He's got Beast Taqueria down on Lower State. He's got the Commodore Corazon and the one in the, I don't know how he does it.
I mean, he's got to drive around a lot all day.
And it always seems so kind.
That's good.
I think one of the best restaurants, and they don't need me to plug them, is Barbareno. And they're always consistently amazing. That's my kind of food.
Okay, good. Let's see, you lived in Hawaii for a while.
I lived there till I was 15.
So you were
Then we moved
15.
to LA, and that's when I learned about Santa Barbara.
So when you were growing up, what were you eating?
Chinese
in Hawaii.
Yeah. And so my idea of sushi was the umeboshi roll.
Right.
So we were over on the North Shore side, and you go to a little like bodega and just get the wasabi with the rice and the little umeboshi, and I thought that was sushi. So when we came over stateside and I went to a sushi restaurant, I was stunned.
What is this?
Look at all the California roll and all this, but thrilled.
California style sushi, yeah.
And I made so many amazing friends in this industry. And one is Daryl Takahara, who manages Arigato.
Right.
And magic happens, just like going to Zaka Mason, it's Jim Clendenin. I started hearing, I had a friend who was gay who died, and his dad called me sobbing and said, would you do his funeral? And I said, of course. And then everybody was dying, and I talked to a foundation about setting up a bank account for victims who couldn't afford the goodbyes that they wanted. And so we did one after another funerals for people that were lost during that horrible time, and no one had to pay for it. And through that, I joked around that I became Saint Meridith of the Gays because I was so loved for doing that, but it was my pleasure. And I had an unfortunate marriage breakup in the mid 90s, and I was sort of in a state of shock, and I walked into this little shop, and the man working there goes, you probably don't remember me, but you did my partner's funeral. And I didn't remember, but I was, so
it's good to be recognized. Yeah.
And he said, do you know about the 10-year-old girl with AIDS that is going into a home because there's nowhere to live? And within a few months, she was my foster child.
Oh,
and that
great.
was Daryl, who runs Arigato, and he gave me this ring that says, for I have wings to fly, which is quoting Frida. But he was such a big part of my life because of little Stephanie, who, of course, back then there was no hope. She only had 2 T cells left, but she stayed with us for a few years.
That's good.
Yeah. So there's those kind of magical moments where you think you're just walking around and something like that happens. Kind of like walking into Pico, and there's the chef that shows me they're still doing it.
There's that chef. Now, you never ate my burger.
No, I wouldn't eat it because I heard you say, someone told me he doesn't like making it. And one day you made it for Winslow, the owner's daughter, and I was dying. And she's sitting in the wine bar eating it. And I'm like, I want it.
It's a good burger.
I'm sure it was. The best thing I ever had that you did was one of the wine dinners. You did the abalone.
The abalone, yeah.
Oh my God.
Was that?
I think it was Karen Steinway from Buttonwood at the time.
Buttonwood, yeah.
Dinner.
Buttonwood.
But you did different
sashimi style abalone.
Oh my God.
It was a pineapple ponzu, a freeze-dried pineapple, and then I made that squid ink tuile on top of it.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a beautiful dish.
And I'm also a huge fan of affogato. And you made your own gelato, and there was an espresso machine, and I just loved it.
Oh yeah, that's always fun.
Speaking of which, there is on State Street Tondi Gelato, and he is from Italy, and he makes all of his gelatos there, and he does an affogato.
I need to check that one out for sure.
Like right now, it's whatever is seasonal. It's like when passion fruit's in season or guavas. You go in and you just cannot believe how good it is.
Next time I come up for our date, we need to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Good. All right.
And then another great thing is the cheese shop, which used to be Say Cheese.
So
they were in the original Natural History of Food series, and then the first wine festival, and then they couldn't stay in it. So rather than just quit on me, they replaced themselves, which was so cool, with Pickleworks.
Yep.
And his name escapes me, but it's this amazing company where he pickles everything, which, by the way, pickling is addictive.
No, pickling is phenomenal.
I think the best caterer in town probably is Duo, I think. and they started pickling, and you walk in their kitchen and there's just jars and jars.
Mm-hmm.
You can't stop them.
I love pickling. Pickles are great.
And I love the cheese shop because they've got, of course, amazing cheeses. And I remember the first time I was in Bath, actually, many years ago, and I walked into a cheese shop and I went, "What is that smell?" And the man said, "That's cheese. You Yanks have to wrap yours in plastic, but we don't."
Yep.
And it was a big wheel
just out
of Stilton, and I died. I went to heaven. And then so the cheese shop, they have to follow the awful rules, but once you taste and buy it, then they wrap it correctly for you.
Yeah.
But they also have other things. Well, it's great small selection of wines, great olive oils. They get bread from Brioche, which is a good bakery, and they bake there, and they make the best cookies. And I love a good cookie.
Who doesn't love a good cookie? I like a big, like, size of your face, soft chocolate chip cookie. Oh.
Well, their molasses cookie is amazing. Dune, which is a chain, but in Santa Barbara,
the coffee.
They make molasses cookies at the holidays, and it's chunks of ginger, but only during the holidays. So
I love ginger. Yeah,
that I'm addicted.
Yeah, I think everybody loves cookies.
And the thing, speaking of Dune, there's places you go in and you order a coffee, and that's the last thing that person wants to do is make you that coffee. And you just walk out and never want to go back. You walk into some of our coffee houses, like Handlebar, Dune, Downtown Coffee, Old Town Coffee. You walk in and, "How are you today, Meredith? So good to see you." Regular. And like Downtown Coffee, it's always their iced tea I want, and they know. And just so kind.
Yeah, kind.
And glad to be doing it.
Well, hospitality. I mean, that's the core of what hospitality should be.
Yes.
The level of kindness, right?
Yes.
To be hospitable. So, what would you, if you had somebody talking to you about getting in their own catering business right now, what would you tell them? Run for the hills.
No, I'd say, do you know what you're doing? First of all, and because people go into business. We've talked about that don't know what they're doing, and like there's
gotta do the research.
What it's involved, but I think there's room for more caterers in Santa Barbara. And
what type?
Well, the most lucrative is to do weddings, and
of course,
several caterers in my life that refused to do them, but I loved it, and I couldn't be at the ceremony because I'd start crying with joy for them.
Yeah.
No, I'd say do it.
Yeah.
I'm glad I did it. I really enjoyed it, but having that burrito business at UCSB kept me alive.
Yeah, kept you afloat.
And I had labels, and it had my contact information, and when I finally was doing so well, I could close it, because delivering to UCSB isn't easy, to say the least.
Well, no, I'm sure.
Oh my God. The young people on their bicycles riding with no hand, not holding on, just driving, not paying attention to red lights.
Oh, now it's all the e-bike stuff.
Okay.
And they just fly.
Oh, that would be worse. Anyway, I got a phone call from someone begging me for my burritos, which made me very happy. The one thing I always say is the only thing I would do that would get me back is if I had the money to open up a diner with comfort food that was the real thing.
Right.
Like not IHOP. Sorry.
No, not IHOP. Fresh made biscuits, fresh made gravy, not out of a packet or a can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The real thing.
Stick to your ribs.
That's the only thing I would still do is I don't think we have a good comfort food restaurant in town.
Something I got to keep in mind. Just got to find the space. That's the other challenge these days, especially finding a good space.
And the rent.
And rent. I mean, rent's it's terrible.
The State Street in Santa Barbara, the rent for the smallest place is $28,000 a month, and there's 14 tables.
$28,000.
It's not
my God.
It can't be done.
No.
You can't make it. So, like when I had my little restaurant, I still catered.
Yeah, you got to be doing $5+ million a year. More.
And you get people in, and the two little sweet ladies my age now who would order 2 glasses of wine and a salad that they'd split and hold that
split it
for 4 hours.
That's what they do. No, of course it's not industry. It's not easy. It's not an easy business.
But it's the only one I ever really loved. And then to go from that to working at the Natural History Museum, where there's scientists, world-class scientists who are so serious about what they're doing and so kind because I fed them and gave them drink to share with me. And so I got to go behind the scenes and learn that amazing world of natural history.
Oh, that's awesome. History is a wonderful thing. So, well, thank you so much, Meridith. It's been a very fun show learning about Santa Barbara. I've been living out here, when did I move out here? It's been about 5 years now, kind of been in the area and really learning a lot. And just what it's opened my eyes to is really the wine. I've learned so much about wine and wine country and how good it is. And I have an obsession with Pinot Noir that comes out of Santa Barbara County.
So amazing.
It's just amazing. And glad to be part of it. I'm glad that you came out to the show, and I'm glad that you are one of my greatest friends. And thank you for sharing your little story and your journey in the hospitality world. Yes, thank you. We're going to close out here. I'm going to remind everybody, please check out the website, check out our socials, makingbeans.com. Will be featured on YouTube. The shows are also going to be cast on Apple Podcasts, so you can also listen. You don't have to just watch the video, the multi-streaming there. And then check out our Instagram. You can also check out my Instagram, cowboy_chef, Chef John Wayne. Appreciate you guys coming out and listening to Making Beans. Every Thursday, we'll have a great show for you, and definitely looking forward to it. So until then, cheers.
Cooking up stories, making dreams. Talk about life, sharing themes. Sip on wisdom, enjoy the ride. Recipes and culture all in stride. Making beans, we break it down. Food and drink on every round. From kitchen tales to heartfelt talks. Spicing up your daily walks. Hospitality, we keep it real. Chefs and brews, they'll make you feel. Every dish, every drink. More than just what's in the sink. Making beans, we break it down. Food and drink on every round. From kitchen tales to heartfelt talks. Spicing up your daily walks. Life is flavorful of zest. Join the table, be our guest. Culture stories, new cuisine. Every episode like a dream. Ooh, 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 ooh. Drink on every round. From kitchen tales to heartfelt talks. Spicing up your daily walks. Life is flavorful of zest. Join the table, be our guest. Culture stories, new cuisine. Every episode like a dream.